Earlier we looked at the fact that Microsoft Access provides a number of templates. Now if any of those templates meet your requirements, then you could just use one of the templates for your database. But often what we are required to make is not available as a template because it needs to be customized and created from scratch. What I'd like to do is create a brand new database. So from the ribbon I'm going to click File, and then I'm going to click New. And I want to create a blank database, as you can see here. Over to the far right hand side I can give this new database a name, and using the yellow button here I can choose a location. I'm just going to click the yellow Browse for a Location button, and I'm going to put this particular database on my desktop. I'm also going to give the database a name, and I want to call it Call Tracking. And I'll click OK. So I'm creating a database called Call Tracking. It's an ACCDB, which is a 2010 file format, and I'm going to put it on the desktop. So I just click Create. Immediately I'm thrown into a brand new database, and I can see the word Call Tracking appearing at the top of my title bar. I'm also taken into a brand new table called Table 1. I'd like to close this table, so I'll just hit the Close Table 1 button. And so what I have is a blank database with absolutely no objects in it. At this point you need to start to create your tables. Now when designing tables you need to really get clear about what is the purpose of the database. The purpose of this database called Call Tracking is literally to track calls made to this particular company. When I start to think about, okay, I need to track the calls made to this particular company, I then discover that I need to record a certain amount of detail about the customers. I need to record a certain amount of detail about the calls themselves and a certain amount of detail about the employees who handled those calls. Immediately this is 3 areas that have been identified, and these become your tables. So we've got a calls table, we've got a customers table, and we've got an employees table. So the first thing you always design are your tables. What I'd like to do is start by designing the employee table. From the ribbon I'm going to click the Create tab, and I want to create a table, so I'm in the Tables group. I always use table design. I think this is the most effective means to create a table. It creates a blank table, so I'll click this button. What we now see are 3 columns in the top part of the screen. There's a field name column, a data type column, and a description column. In the field name column is where you list all the fields that you want in your table, i.e. you list all the information you want to capture about the employees. The tricks with particular fields is you can have up to 255 fields in one table, no more. So I'm first of all going to start by entering a field, Employee ID. In databases it always pays to create a first field called ID, and this uniquely identifies each record. So I want to uniquely identify each employee. Now notice I don't use spaces. There are some rules when you create tables, and one of the rules I have is not to use spaces. So I'm having employee ID. Under that, so I'm just hitting the down arrow, I want to have another field, and this is title of courtesy. And again, I don't use spaces. Some people will use underscore, so they'll go title underscore of underscore courtesy, but I find that this makes the fields too lengthy, so I just leave them with no spaces and no underscore. Notice also when you look down here in the right corner, a field name can be up to 64 characters long, including spaces. My suggestion is no spaces, and try to keep your field names short. Don't go up to 64 characters, otherwise these are too long and too bulky to work with. I'd also like each employee to record a first name, and I'd like to record each employee's last name. Now notice how I've broken something as simple as name down into 3 fields. I think it's important to break things down because then you can easily sort and manipulate data. For example, if I need to sort by last name, it's going to be easy because I have last name in a separate field to first name. And I have title of courtesy, which is Mr., Mrs., Ms., in a separate field again. I'd also like to keep information about their job title. One word, birth date, hire date, address line 1, address line 2, and town and city. Notice also I've broken the address down into various fields, again because I often like to extract or be able to sort by a particular city, and if this is in its own separate field, it's easy to do that. I'd also like to keep a record of their home phone, their email, their salary, whether they're married or not, number of children, dependent, photo, and note. Notice I don't use S's. I haven't called it notes. I tend to use singular references, not plural. That way I don't have to think, as I'm working with the database 6 months later, did I call the field notes or did I call it note? If you have a certain consistent way that you do things, it makes it much easier for you to work with the database. So I don't use spaces, I keep my field names short, and I don't use S's. I'd like to actually save this table now, so what I'm going to do on the Quick Access toolbar, which resides above the ribbon in the top left of your screen, is I'm going to click the Save button. What I do is I prefix tables with 3 letters TBL. The reason for this is as you build many objects in your database, they all start to sound the same. Whereas if you prefix all the tables with TBL, it will also always list all the tables together. And if you prefix the queries with QRY, it always lists the queries together because they start with the same 3 letters. So it's just a good habit to get into. So TBL employee. Again, I don't use S's, I keep it singular. So I have one table called TBL employee, and these are the pieces of information I want to keep or the fields I want to record. Again, no spaces, no S's. So I click OK to save. Now because I haven't defined a primary key, which we will do later, it's actually telling me you haven't got a primary key defined and do you want to create one now? I'm going to say no because I want to talk about this and deal with this later, so I'll just choose no. Immediately in my navigation pane in the tables group, I can see that I have now one object in this database and it's a table called TBL employee. If I was to close this table just by hitting the close TBL employee button, the table's closed and I can see it in my navigation pane. If I was to double click and open it, here are my fields going across as column headings: employee ID, title of courtesy, first name, last name, job title, so on and so forth. So this is the information I want to capture about each employee. If I then hit the close button again, I can close that table. Now what I want to do is refine the design of this particular table. So I wish to switch to the design view. If I click once on TBL employee and then I right click on TBL employee, I can go into design view. When I go into design view, I'm back to where I was before. In fact, to the very left of the ribbon, there's a button called View, and if you click on it, you'll switch to viewing the table, and it then changes to a set square, and if you click on it again, you'll switch back to the design. So what we'll be doing quite a bit of is switching to the table, back to design, switching to the table, back to design. So I need you in the design for now.